Hi folks, it's been a little while since we've done one of these weekly updates. What with vacation and family commitments, it's been almost a month, certainly 4 weeks since the last one of these, which I think was on the 4th of July. What have I been reading this month? I've been fairly prolific on the reading front in July, and but as July's wrap-up video is imminent, it should arrive at the weekend sometime. I'm not going to cover those books in too much depth today. I think it'll just get a bit repetitive, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the books that I finished in the last few days. The first of those is Pastwatch by Orson Scott Card, which actually was not on my planned TBR list for the month of July. And actually that's a little bit of a theme with some of the books that we're going to talk about today. So anyway, Pastwatch by Orson Scott Card. So this is set a few hundred years in the future. And in this future, it's possible to view the past by some device or other, and there are various kinds of those devices. And ultimately it becomes possible to send messages or holograms back to the past, and then ultimately people too. And so this is a tale of the grandfather paradox. You know, can you go back in time and kill your grandfather, or will you then cease to exist? So it's the grandfather paradox, but on a sort of societal and meta-historic basis. So Christopher Columbus is the pivot in this case, and some previous future historians have found a way to intervene in the past, and they determined that his decision, Christopher Columbus, that is, his decision not to sail west, but to instead focus on his efforts of liberating the Holy Lands from the Turks and to restore it to Christendom, was a bad move. Their timeline having ended badly, having been taken over by the Aztecs or the Mayans or the Texicalani, whoever it was, the Aztecs, who knows, the Americans anyway, propagating human sacrifice and a brutal regime associated with that around the world. So those future scientists made an intervention, and our future scientists, if you like, the ones on our timeline, recognise or realise that someone's intervened, and they're now living in a different timeline as a result. And the result of that intervention is our timeline. So where Columbus did sail west, and where the Europeans were dominant in the world for centuries afterwards, and with the devastating results for the people of South America at the time, well, North America for that matter. And so our future scientists in our world begin to wonder whether things might not have been better if that didn't happen, and they seek to influence the past in a new way, to tweak things, to intervene directly, and with the potential to have quite devastating consequences for the timeline that they and now we are living on. So it's part historical fiction as we follow Christopher Columbus as he seeks funding for his mission to the west, the ships to sail in, and the royal ascent for his voyage, and the rewards that he seeks as a result of doing it. And then it's part kind of time travel, timey-wimey paradox, and part kind of future, and part painting a picture of a future that hasn't happened yet. So I found that kind of mishmash quite good. I enjoyed reading the book. It had come recommended to me by a couple of different people, and Orson Scott Card can write a book. I don't know that it's high art or literary science fiction or anything, but it's a fun read. I enjoyed it. Next, I finished Footfall by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle, and this is a book that I read to death when I was a kid. I bought a copy in the mid-1980s when it came out, and wore that copy out. I reread it so much, but it has been decades since I last read it, so I was curious to see how well it held up. And this is a classic tale of alien invasion, and the elephant-like aliens that arrive in our solar system, having effectively burnt their bridges. They can't go back home again, so they're here to stay, and they're here to stay on their terms, not ours. So they start lobbing rocks at us from orbit, and destroying military bases, strategic intersections, junctions, dams, and things like that. And so the humans of Earth are quickly in shit state. But the aliens of the peace, they're built different, and their way of living and their way of thinking is quite different to ours, and they make some fundamental mistakes in assumptions about our collective behaviour, which don't tally with how we actually behave. And so that features large. I'd forgotten there's quite a slow build-up. It's not true to say that nothing happens, but there's quite a lot of preparatory ground laying that happens for the first, 100 or so pages of the 500 odd that there are in the book. Yeah, just under. So you've got to go through that first 20% before exciting things start happening. And I think I've said a number of times before, this has the best use of an Orion concept spaceship in a science fiction book that I'm aware of. And that's really cool at the end. And of course, this being, dare I say it, an American written science fiction book, it's quite focused on the US, obviously, and some of the usual kind of heroics that might be associated with that occur in this book. But it's a fun read. I enjoyed reading it again and revisiting it. I don't know that it wowed me in quite the same way as it did when I was a teen, but still, I was surprised by how well it held up. It's a fun read. I wouldn't go in if you haven't read it before, I wouldn't go in expecting too much. And it's a little bit dated, from its origins in the mid 80s, but not too badly, I don't think. I had fun reading it again. It was good. Next was The Falling Woman by Pat Murphy, and this is on the Broderick and DeFilippo 101 best novels list. And this has some links to the first book, actually, the Pastwatch, only in that it's focused on an archaeological dig where the protagonist, she's an archaeologist, an American, and she is in Mexico in I think it's the Yucatan Peninsula, and she's had mental health issues in the past, including a spell in an institution, and she's estranged from her husband for many years, I think well over a decade. And but she has a daughter that's been living with her ex-husband, and that ex-husband has subsequently died, and so her daughter, who doesn't really know her mother, she was a young child when she left, has come to Mexico to seek some kind of reconnection or reconciliation with her mother. So that's the guts of the story, I suppose, is the reconciliation of those two. But the writing's interesting. It's almost a dreamlike or a trancey or even a little bit trippy. I wasn't really expecting that from the author. Not that I've read any of her other work, but I did quite like the way that she did that. So Diane, the daughter, as I said, she's recently bereaved and she's sought out her mother. And I thought that mother-daughter relationship was pretty well done. So in some senses, Diane is she is literally on the archaeological dig, and she's helping Liz and her team to explore the local environment. But she's also in a sort of relationship dig, an archaeological dig, trying to remove layers from her mother to understand her. The writing is in sort of short, punchy sentences, and but which I suppose there's a risk of that being simplistic, but she kind of uses those short, punchy sentences to build, I think, quite a compelling and evocative image of life on this archaeological dig, the glimpses of the distant Mayan past, of the local environment and the local Mayan and Mexican people, and of a thawing of that mother-daughter relationship. I thought that was done pretty well. So I was a little bit surprised actually by how much I did enjoy it. It was good. Next, another bonus extra book is Waystation, of course, by Clifford D. Simak. And I suppose the summary for this one is that I liked it. It was good. I enjoyed my time with it, and nothing negative to say about it. But also didn't blow my socks off. I think there are probably better Simak books that I might want to read in the future. City, for example. The prose obviously is great, and in this case, it's set in the country, so it's quite kind of bucolic setting. And the tone of the book I found a little bit wistful, melancholic. Even, and it reminded me a little bit, I mean, the story is completely different to anything in a Keith Roberts book, but it reminded me a little bit in tone to some of Keith Roberts' writing. The protagonist is a chap called Enoch, and he's apparently a man in his 30s, I think, but he's actually well over 100 years old, and maybe closer to 150 by the time the events in the book actually happen. And the fact that he's that old and a little bit different is well understood locally, but it's a sort of live and let live a sort of environment. As long as you're not bothering anyone, then who cares? But sadly for Enoch, he's come to the attention of the authorities. They've heard about this guy, and they're wondering what's going on. And so they start to observe him. Whilst they can observe his comings and goings, they can't really get much insight into what's actually happening. And Enoch, some time back, was given the post of custodian or caretaker, if you like, of an interstellar way station. The aliens that gave him the job of turned his house into a sort of multi-story, multi-dimensional portal, a stopover on an interstellar kind of faster than light, instantaneous travel from one place to another that goes on seemingly quite frequently out in the galaxy. So these aliens kind of come and go, and some spend a bit of time with Enoch. Some are regular visitors, some bring gifts. So the book is kind of a mixture of Enoch's memories of his time at the way station, the aliens that he's met. There's also Lucy, who's a local deaf-mute girl, makes a couple of brief appearances, and actually ultimately is quite pivotal to the plot in ways that I won't dwell on. And we get some insight into what the aliens make of Earth and its human kind of masters. And the big question is, are we worthy, or more likely not, of inclusion in the galactic civilization, which Enoch sees glimpses of, and we get glimpses too through the book. And if not, then what does it take to make that happen? I would say It's not really a plot-heavy book. I think it's more atmospheric, more introspective than propulsive from a narrative point of view. But Simak's prose is lovely, and I think that's probably a reward enough. I enjoyed it. Next, the next book that I read, again, a bonus extra book, was Embers of War by Gareth Powell, which I actually don't possess a physical copy of. I just listened to it on audiobook. I've only read one other Gareth Powell book. I think it was Styles and Bones, which I enjoyed, although the audiobook was not brilliantly produced, I didn't think. This one was fine. From a production point of view, it was probably a notch above, in fact. So in this book, then, in the prologue at the very beginning, the first few pages, we get to observe the destruction of a sentient world forest. And the purpose of that is simply to kill the leaders of the opposing side in a war who are holed up somewhere on the planet, concealed, having a conference. The objective being to end the war, perhaps saving millions of lives in the process. So it's a significant event, but the precise significance of it is slowly revealed, maybe, as the book progresses. There's some interesting characters in the book, not least of which is Trouble Dog, the ship. And both her and her captain now work for something called the House of Reclamation. It's a sort of galactic Red Cross type organisation. They are rescuers of the stranded, the shot down and the injured. And I think if you like the Expanse, then Trouble Dog is like the Rocinante, only bigger and with added personality and attitude. And in fact, the mind that runs Trouble Dog and is effectively a character in the book is at some point in her past actually constructed with human DNA. And so that's a bit of a twist that the Rossi didn't have. And I think, talking of the Expanse, I think I'm going to find as the trilogy progresses that I'm going to get similar found family vibe, which I really enjoyed in the Expanse, because the Trouble Dog and her skipper, Sal Constance, are accumulating cute crew members along the way in the first book. So it's definitely a first book in a trilogy, although having said that, there are elements of the plot that wrap up nicely in this book, but there are two to come. And it tees up the events in books 2 and 3 pretty well, I think. Like I said, I think the audiobook presentation was very good. It's an ensemble cast with almost a different voice for each point of view character, of which there are several. And I enjoyed my time with it, actually, much more than I thought I would. I'd heard good things about it, but I was pleased to find that validated. And although it's not in my planned TBR for August, and we're only on the 1st of August, I'm already planning to kind of ski off piece a little bit, and I'm going to go straight onto Fleet of Knives, which is book 2 in the Embers of War trilogy. So that's everything that I've read in the last week, or finished in the last week at least. How about you? Have you been getting on? Is there anything that you've read that you particularly want to recommend? Do let us know in the comments down below. Now then, as the observant among you may have noticed, I am sporting some channel merch, a SciFiScavenger t-shirt and a rather fetching mug with the channel logo on it as well. And these have come about because Chris Badenoch, who is a science fiction fan, a viewer of this channel, and also, happily for me, a graphic designer. And some months back, he offered to do me some logos for the channel, and he's done something similar for one or two other channels as well. So I've had the logo on my YouTube channel header for some time now. And over the last few months, when he's had the time, Chris has been tinkering with the logo and the strap lines and so on. And I'm pleased to say there is now a full range of SciFiScavenger branded merch available via his Redbubble store. There are t-shirts of various designs, there are hoodies, sweatshirts, cushion covers, if you can believe it, fridge magnets, phone cases, mugs, in different colours, by the way, posters, hats and badges, and all sorts of other things too. You'll spot while you're there, I think, some merch for other channels that Chris has done some work for as well, that you might know and watch. And plus there are some other designs that Chris has done, including some cool vintage cover art based t-shirts and other things. So have a look, knock yourselves out. I'm grateful to Chris for taking the time to do that for me. I'm a bit tickled to have my own channel on a t-shirt and a mug so far. I mean, there are other things I could buy as well. Redbubble have fulfillment centres in most parts of the world, so shipping should be reasonable to wherever you're watching from. Certainly, I think Europe and North America are going to be well covered. So I'm under no illusions. If there are 5 things sold and I've bought 2 of them, then I'll be amazed. But if your life was not complete until now, and you realise that the only thing that's going to work for you is to get a SciFiScavenger t-shirt or a mug or a fridge magnet or whatever, then Chris's Redbubble store is the place to go. And I'll put the link in the description for this video. Channel stuff next then. Subs are at 6,303, which is up 209, I think, since the last time that we did one of these a few weeks back. So if you're one of those 209, or if you've just stumbled across my channel for the first time today, then a huge welcome to you all. I'm John, and I focus on reading, collecting, and waffling on about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Mike, who gives a thumbs up for Spook Country by William Gibson, which is on my, notionally anyway, on my TBR pile for August. And he says that he thinks Gibson is more interested in showing the shadows and the underbelly and the liminal spaces of society than in creating elaborate worlds. At least elaborate worlds for its own sake. His world building, Mike thinks, is hyper-realistic, not fantastic. And Mike also went on to say that he's currently reading Inversions by Ian M. Banks, which happens to be my favourite of the Culture series of books, despite having almost none of the usual Culture elements to it. Anyway, and the reason I said that Spook Country is notionally on my TBR, it's one of the books that I picked, but I hadn't realised when I did that it's book 2 of a at least thematically linked trilogy, and it's been recommended to me that I read Pattern Recognition instead, which is the first book of Spook Country. So I do now have a copy of Pattern Recognition, so I think I'll swap those out. So thank you to Mike for taking the time to leave a comment, and to all of you that have done the same. I do, as always, really appreciate it. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel. And normally I would do this for the last week, but since it's been a while, let's take a look at what's been on since the last time we did one of these. There was June's wrap-up a few weeks back, in which I look at all the books that I read and I rank them in order of preference, and then ultimately declare a book of the month. There was a shelf help video, which was desperate shelving measures. I replaced some what ended up being temporary shelving with some new bookcases, and I've been busy kind of loading those up. So if you like a bit of shelf misery, then that's a good video for you to watch. And then I did a sort of mid-year report video, if you like, the best and worst reads out of the 80 odd that I've read so far this year. And I declared some contenders therefore for Book of the Year, and we'll see how we get on with the second half of this year. But there was an interview with Casper Gion, aka Tom Toner, and that was focused mainly on his new book, The Immeasurable Heaven, which I read and enjoyed a couple of weeks back, and which is now available to buy. As is often the case with interview videos, about a dozen people have watched it. I mean, I'm exaggerating. It's several hundred actually, but the views for those interviews, unless there's a really high name recognition for the individual concerned, the author, and generally there isn't, because I don't have that big a draw. Then they don't get as many views. So if I was hunting and pecking for view count, then I might worry about that. But it was really interesting to speak to Casper, and I do enjoy doing them. I don't have anything else planned along those lines for this year, but you never know. And then there was July's book haul, which included a couple of dealer visits that me and Whitney from Secret Source of Storycraft fitted in when she was over, which was back in June. And so that's quite a substantial haul. Then I did a collection overview of what I thought was complete Pan Lozenge collection of all 80 books in that livery. And I thought it was complete because I'd marked one of them as acquired in my tracking spreadsheet that I was using. And as far as I can tell, I'd done that completely unjustifiably because I don't have it. It's a People Trap by Robert Sheckley. An eagle-eyed viewer spotted that I didn't hold that one up and pointed that out. And I thought, no, I definitely have that. It says so on the spreadsheet of doom. But I couldn't find it, so I think I must just have I don't know, got confused at some point. It's definitely possible. So I actually don't have a complete collection, slightly embarrassingly, despite having declared victory. So I need to find a copy of that. I think someone might be sending me a copy. I very kindly offered to do that, so that's awesome. It hasn't arrived yet. And then most recently, then on Sunday was the usual kind of TBR selection with the Bingo Balls of Fate and the Decision Dice of Destiny. And actually, one viewer. Maybe I should have had this as a second comment of the week. One viewer described their upset at the fact that there was a lack of complete alliteration in the Bingo Balls of Fate. Obviously, it would be better if it was the Bingo Balls of Book or the Bingo Balls of Bedlam or the Bingo Balls of Bookshelf or something. So I might have to think of a different term for the poor old Bingo Balls. I went through that process and I've chosen 10 books, 8 via the Bingo Balls and the dice, and then 2 readers' picks, which will form the basis for my TBR pile for August. I'm definitely going to add one in the form of Fleet of Knives, the second in the Embers of War trilogy, and maybe one or two others as the month progresses as well. So we'll see. I'm always surprised by how many people tune in to watch that video. It is just me staring indecisively at my shelves for 10 or 15 minutes. But nonetheless, I know it has its fans, and so I'm pleased to have done that. So that was it. I had half an idea I might have another video during the week, but I'm finding that generally life is just getting in the way at the moment, quite reasonably so. So I think for the next while, it's going to be a diet of one video on Friday, this one, and then one other during the week, either on a Sunday or a Tuesday, depending on when I have the time to do it. And if I can squeeze another one in, then happy days. On the book buying front, July has actually been quite a month from that perspective. I recorded August's haul video already because I was surrounded by piles of books and I needed to get them on my shelves. But as you'll see in that video when it arrives in a couple of weeks' time, I visited a few different used bookshops whilst I was away in Scotland with my wife. And let's just say that some books were purchased. And those are all now on my shelves. But I have bought a couple of books then, some of which are still on their way. So the to be hauled pile is currently just 3 books. Let's take a quick look ahead. On Sunday, there will be July's wrap-up video. I read / listen to, if you must, 15 science fiction books during July, and I'll be ranking those as usual, sharing some thoughts on each of them, and ultimately declaring a book of the month. And on top of that, I want to compare and contrast 2 books that I've read this year, both of which feature realistic robots whose reason for being is entirely to satisfy men sexually. That's The Holy Machine by Chris Beckett and Annie Bot by Sierra Greer, which recently won the Arthur C. Clarke prize. They're superficially similar, but I think are quite different in tone and setting, and also the journey that the sexy robot protagonist goes through in each case. So that will come maybe this coming week, maybe next weekend. I'm not 100% sure. After that, I do have a few video ideas in various early states of development, but as I said, those will just have to arrive as and when time allows. So what will I be reading in the coming week? Well, from August's TBR pile, I've made a start on Doggerland by Ben Smith, which is set in a sort of indeterminate time in the future, and it's a two-hander really. It's a youngish man and an older man, both of whom seem to be the sole custodians of a very decrepit and worn-out wind turbine farm in the North Sea somewhere, and that's about as much as I can tell you at the moment. I've only read a few chapters. And after I finish that, and I think I will finish that quite quickly, I think I'm going to make short work of it. Then I'm going to read We All Died at Breakaway Station by Richard Meredith, which is the first of the Venture SF series, of which there are 25, and I haven't read any of them, so I'm going to start at book 1. And then, as I said, I'm going to read or listen to Fleet of Knives, the second book in the Embers of War trilogy, and I will almost finish that on Sunday. I've got a long run planned. I'm training for another silly race. And I'll more or less polish that off it just in the morning on Sunday. So we'll see how we get on with all of that, and then I'll decide what I'm going to read an audio book after I've finished Fleet of Knives. I might be compelled to go on to the third book in the Embers of War series, but if not, then it will be Powell, I think, by Neil Asher, which was the next book I want to tackle on my planned TBR. That is everything. Thank you, as always, for watching, and until next time, goodbye for now.